Hello JNUC 2022 and welcome to sunny San Diego or wherever in the world you're joining from. This is our presentation, a toolkit for Jamf admins. My name is Christopher Shasi. I am the owner and lead engineer at Rocketman. I started using Jamf back in 2015 and am CCT certified, CCA certified, CCE certified, CJA certified when all those certifications were relevant, and then also Jamf 3 and 400 levels certified. I've also performed, I'm a Jamf service partner and I've probably performed about 150 jump starts over the years. So got lots of experience in Jamf. With me is Chad Lawson, and Chad's been using Jamf how long have you been using Jamf actually, Chad?
2009.
Wow, so yeah, he got me beat on that front. He's also CCA, CCE, and CJA certified, and then Jamf 3 and 400 certified as well. Also a Jamf service partner, and man, I think he's got probably 250 or 300 jump starts under his belt.
Somewhere in that range.
Is that right, Chad?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've both seen a lot of use cases over the years of all kinds of different Jamf environments. And then Chad Lawson, I forgot to mention, is our DevOps engineer at Rocketman. So he's kind of in the back end setting up a lot of the amazing scripts that we use to set up the industry standard workflows for our clients. Today we want to talk to you about a new product that we're launching called the Jamf Toolkit. But before we get into that, we want to talk through some of the challenges that Jamf admins face on a regular basis, why we started Rocketman and what Rocketman's vision is, some of the solutions Chad and the rest of our team have built over the years, and then finally show you what this new product we're launching is. So I'm going to hand it off to Chad to talk through the challenges for Mac admins.
Yeah, I started in Mac OS X back in late 2000, early 2001. I was one of those people that made fun of Macs in the OS 9 days. I was formerly a PC guy and then went to Unix. And a friend of mine who was working at Apple when OS X came out dared me to give it a try, and I quickly fell in love. His next dare was then to work at Apple. I was on the build engineering team from 10.0 to 10.2. And then after that, I've been in the Apple consulting world. And for me, it's been interesting just following all these different, every year there are the same challenges and there are different challenges. From the human side of things, I love being on tier 1 help desk and getting the same people asking for their passwords to get reset time and time again. Most organizations that I've worked with, either as a consultant or full-time, are hybrid environments, not all Mac, not all PC, obviously. And as such, there's always been kind of this difference between how Mac users are treated and PC users are treated from an IT standpoint, sometimes better, sometimes worse. But there's always that desire within IT to kind of have parity. So as such, because of concerns about admin rights for PCs, usually people are working in a standard environment, so they want to make the Macs work with standard users. But that always, no matter how many times we continue to push forward with solving all the problems of giving people the rights they need, there's always something else they need. But then there's always also the challenges of various accessories, either something they brought in or they had the organization buy for them, may not be working right out of the box, and we have to be able to handle that. And then the intermittent connections with Wi-Fi, and all of that's fine when we're all in-house together. But for the last couple of years, there's been those challenges of everybody suddenly working remote. I was in a jumpstart in 2020. It was March, April, and the client interrupted me in mid-sentence and said, "I'm sorry, hang on a second, something's going on. Let me put you on hold." Wandered off for a couple of minutes. Time kept ticking. I think it ended up being close to 20 minutes before he popped back and said, "I'm sorry, but we've all been told we have to go home right now. We're evacuating, going into the company is shutting down and everybody's going remote, and I have to start getting everybody's computers ready to work remotely. So we end up having to reschedule that. So now all of a sudden, all those challenges we had, password resets, not being able to touch the person and the computer trying to help everything get going, just got amped up a notch. But on top of the personal issues, the human issues, there are the various technology issues. And like I said, I've been around since 10.0. And it seems like every version of the operating system just keeps throwing one or two more challenges our way. And then also with that, and I've been almost exclusively, as far as the MDM world and here with Rocket Man, entirely Jamf based for that kind of support. And using the Jamf API, so much of our scripting and so much of our workflows involve policy scripts that run and interact with the API. And with a classic API, that was all done. You'd communicate to the server with XML. You could request back XML or JSON, and we were just using username and password or the hash, which was just a base 64 encoded set of credentials. Well, now with the new API, we're going in a much more modern direction. And everything's being done in JSON, and everything is being done with tokens. Well, all of that would have been fine because there's a great tool for parsing JSON, Python. But all this is happening just as Apple is removing Python from all of our computers. And there aren't a lot of great built-in shell tools that are automatically provided with the Mac for parsing JSON in large formats. I can use sed and awk to grab little pieces, but not everything all at once. So the technology keeps changing. And then in the OS, they keep throwing new challenges our way. I remember my first big challenge of having to change my mindset was imaging is dead, to which I always said long live provisioning, having to shift from bulk rolling out of images of all of our computers to having to just simply bring the computer up, enroll it, and let those processes go. But on top of that, wasn't that long ago that we first had to get used to PPPC, and how are we going to have the camera enabled, microphone, screen sharing for the applications we need within our organization. And then on top of that, you add in File Vault and all of the, what File Vault users are there, what secure tokens are there, what Bootstrap tokens are there. There's activation lock. People turn in computers and suddenly we can't get into their computers anymore. There's OS updates and upgrades. We can't push out combo updates anymore. Suddenly we're having to deal with different ways of doing it, from the MDM down to the command line. The T2 chip is throwing more things our way. All of a sudden, and I lived through the whole PowerPC to Intel transition. Now we have to go from Intel to Apple. I'm getting upset. I'm just going to hand this off to Chris. Every OS is a new technical difficulty. Chris.
Thanks, Chad. I'm sure as Chad was going on and ranting there, some people were starting to feel a little bit of PTSD start to kind of flare up in them. And I'm sure there's a lot of terms Chad was using that were bringing up maybe some nightmares, or just like, I don't know who JSON is or this awk or sed thing, but I've been dealing with some of these problems. And that's where we come into the plight of the Jamf admin, because, if we're being honest, since 10.13.4, things have been changing a lot. Things have been changing rapidly, and Apple has been throwing us a lot of curveballs. And when those curveballs happen, we have to figure out how to adapt with them. So, back in Big Sur, when the installer binary was broken, we kind of had to figure out a new way to install macOS updates. So what do most people do in those situations? Well, we Google a solution. So we go out and we try to figure out what's happening, how to fix it, how to deploy this new critical update that needs to be deployed now that the old method that we used to use no longer seems to work on the new computers. And then what do we find as we're Googling stuff? Well, we find these out-of-date solutions. So you're like, okay, well, here's a solution, but it's from 2017, so I'm not really sure if that's going to work in 2022. But you search around a little bit more. Maybe you use the Mac Admins Forum, which is an amazing resource you should definitely use. And a couple people kind of point you in a direction of like, hey, this could work for you. So you start looking at that solution. But then you see that it's not actually Jamf specific, which is fine. I mean, it's awesome that people make tools that are MDM agnostic. But the issue with that is now you have these complex instructions that you're trying to figure out. Like, how do I take this tool and make it work in my Jamf server? It kind of gives me instructions, but they're not necessarily specifically for Jamf. So I'm trying to like interpret how to do that. And then finally, after, days, maybe weeks of work and trying to back and forward figure this out while you're doing everything else at your job, you finally get this set up and it seems to be working, but you run into a snag and you don't know if it's something you set up or you don't know if it's just not working, and you have no one to call, right? You found this open source solution. It's awesome that someone put together, but you just really want to be able to call someone and say, hey, this isn't working. I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's someone else. And I don't want you to beg me. I don't want to have to beg to do it because obviously I'm not paying you. You're just some random person. And this is a struggle that all of us have gone through a lot of times. And, I'm not trying to say that open source solutions aren't amazing. We use them all the time. We use Dep Notify quite often at Rocket Man. We have plenty of videos showing how we use that. But it's just the expansive list of tools that are out there, some really good, some maybe not so good to solve all these different problems, ends up making being a Jamf admin a little bit difficult sometimes. And that brings us to our vision at Rocket Man. So to talk about our vision for Rocket Man, I first want to talk about the mission for Jamf. So Jamf's mission is to help organizations succeed with Apple. What's Rocket Man's mission? To help organizations succeed with Jamf. Now to talk about how we do that, I want to talk about our journey. So we started this company in 2017. And at the beginning, I was working at Jamf. I was doing the educational services side of things and then moved into the pro services side of things, doing jump starts and different types of engagements like that. But I saw a need to help people in a bigger way. So we started working with large enterprise clients to help them get best-in-class Jamf type work. These were a lot of organizations that had really complex challenges and not really anyone on their team that understood how to manage Apple devices at all, especially not on an enterprise level, and then also had, a large budget to pay for it. After we'd been working for a couple years, we looked back at our vision and we said, well, we want to be able to help more organizations succeed with Jamf. So we started monthly meetups. These are called Launchpad monthly meetups, where we talk about the latest and greatest Apple and Jamf things, maybe some tools that we put together. A lot of the keynote presentations are on our website or actually on our YouTube channel if you want to head over there and check those out. And anyone can attend this. They're remote sessions, so please feel free to start joining those, shameless plug. But we saw recently, talking with our team, that we wanted to have something a bit more for people than just the monthly meetups, and that's where the Jamf Toolkit really comes into play. Before I show you exactly what that is, I want to hand it off to Chad to talk through some of the cool workflows we've set up over the years.
The approach that we've been taking for making all these tools is that, like Chris said, we've been dealing a lot with, we started off with a lot more enterprise size companies. So they had what seemed like at the beginning, it always starting with a client, it always seemed like their problem or their situation was unique. We need to be able to do X, Y, Z. And we create a custom solution for them, and working with either just as we're finishing up that one or just after, starting with another customer who's having very similar concerns, needs a very similar workflow. But it would require taking the tools that we've written, taking the scripts, and tweaking a good amount of them. So, our private repos would be full of different branches for each individual customer. But we started seeing that 90% of the tools that we were creating could work with any of our customers if we just tweaked them a little bit, if we just changed our process so that we could make little changes without having to rewrite the script. And luckily, because as Chris mentioned, Everything, when we work with customers, we're working specifically with Jamf. We have Jamf methodologies at our disposal. For example, everything when you're doing a Jamf policy script allows you to include different parameters pass in. I mean, we know 1, 2, and 3 are reserved. I'd be interested to know if anybody's really ever used 1 or 2. I always use 3 or pull that information from the system. What's the active username? But 4 through, 11, you can customize on each script run through every single policy. So what if we started changing our methodologies for creating our tools to heavily leverage that? So take, for example, you might find a script, like Chris mentioned, finding a solution on the internet. You might find one that says, okay, take this script and change lines 5, 17, and 12 to change how long you need this to work for. Okay, well, what if we just simply, because one was done as a integer, one was done in minutes, and one was done as a string or something like that. What if instead we write the script so that you pass that in as a single parameter, maybe number 4, and then do all the calculations within. So all of our tools, we heavily leverage these Jamf parameters to be able to drive how the script works. So now when we write a tool, we write it once. And then we make sure then that any other changes that need to be done can be done within those parameters. And there's always certain things that we're not necessarily able to do within the GUI. A lot of our stuff, a lot of our technology, a lot of our workflows heavily leverage the API. I in particular, my favorite, if you haven't taken the 400 class, you should. It's fun. It's a lot of API work. It's great. A lot of good challenges. But also the workflows that we have, if you think about it, the things we put together, Chris talked about those complex directions, complex instructions. And so if we're going to deploy a particular tool to somebody's Jamf server, you have to put the script in. You have to then configure that script. You have to, with all of its labels, you have to create the policy. Maybe you have a particular way your workflow does is needing a particular group. If it's doing an API call, you want to have a separate API user. So there's multiple components that go into Jamf to make one workflow work. So we wanted to make sure that when we're building this out, that it's something that can be easily done. Anybody can just pick this up and drop this in. And so to that point, some of the tools that we've been developing that Chris is going to talk about heavily allow for a one-click integration into Jamf. With that, I'll hand it back over to Chris.
Thanks, Chad. So Chad and our team have been working on all kinds of awesome solutions within Jamf for our clients, and we wanted to bring those to people that aren't our clients, and that is where we're announcing the Jamf Toolkit. So when we started looking into creating a repository for other Jamf admins, we wanted to create something that was current, something that was consistent, both in how it's created and the documentation, and also something that was supported. So what is the Jamf Toolkit? Well, this is going to be up-to-date tools, applications, and script that can be used to maximize Jamf Pro. We have this with easy-to-follow instructions and with expert support for all of these products. And when I mean expert support, I mean Chad. I mean myself. I mean the other members of the Rocketman team who have maybe created some of these workflows and use them on a regular basis. And best of all, they're all built specific for Jamf. And this gives us a lot of abilities to make this so much easier to use, and also the instructions easy to follow, which we're going to show you in a second. So let's actually take a look at what the Jamf Toolkit looks like. So the Jamf Toolkit is right now 13 different tools that we've created for our various clients, and we've built to help maximize how to utilize Jamf Pro like someone who's a large enterprise. So you see here we have one for macOS upgrades. We have the server map tool, which Chad's going to show you. That's a really cool application that kind of gives you a bird's eye view of your server and allows you to kind of organize and categorize things. We also have the break glass admin, which gives you a backdoor admin account that rotates on each computer. There's a temporary admin. If you want to migrate from one MDM server over to Jamf Pro, we have a really slick workflow for doing that. We have a dep notify starter script and many other things as you see here. And by the time that we actually launch this by JNUC, you're probably going to see a lot more tools there. Also, you have the ability to open a request if a tool's not working or you just need help with some, and also the ability to open a feature request if there's a tool that you need that's not available yet, or a feature within a tool that you'd like to request. So let's take a look inside of one of these tools, the temporary admin tool. So this is a tool that provides temporary admin rights to standard users. So if you're moving your users over to standard, this is going to be a great one for your toolkit. So if you drill down into here, you're going to get some information about how it works. With this particular tool, we wanted to showcase kind of 2 different workflows you can use, but with how customizable it is, there's definitely more workflows available. Then we go into all those parameters that Chad was talking about and how to configure them. Chad has done some neat work with parameters of allowing us to set up multiple different workflows for people with one parameter. And then down here we have the deployment instructions as well. So this will show you exactly how to deploy it through Jamf Pro. However, even if with these deployment instructions, it still can be a little cumbersome to deploy something like this. It might look simple at first glance, but you have to add a script to Jamf, you have to set the parameter labels, you then have to create an API user, because we're doing an API call for this one. And then you have to create a policy and set the default parameters to be what we're expecting. And if they're not set the right way, the script's not going to work and you're going to get an error. You then have to create a smart group or a static group with the right name so that the script is recognizing which group to put the device in and out of. So it's still a little bit confusing. Luckily though, Chad has made a really cool workflow to automatically set up all of this. So right out of the box, with a couple clicks, you have this whole workflow set up in your Jamf Pro server. So I'm going to hand it off to him to talk through this.
Yeah, as Chris mentioned earlier, the idea of complex instructions, and you saw the ones on our Jamf Toolkit page. Those weren't too bad, but if you've ever done any heavy amount of technology documentation, even the simplest of actions can become really complicated to document, and then also really complicated to follow. Take this particular one, this temporary admin access. There's 4 different components that need to get installed in Jamf. As I think Chris was mentioning some of this, you have to have the API account, you need to have a static group, upload the script, and create the policy. So what this tool does, most if not all of our workflows now have this auto deploy tool. You can either just drag this directly into terminal and run it that way. You could double click it and it would run, or if you're old school like me, you could even CD to the folder and run it. I'll just go ahead and drag it down for today's purposes, because if you double click it, the terminal window goes away too quickly at the end of it. Now it detects that the computer is enrolled in Jamf. So if it's just you're using it for one environment, perfect. But if you're like us, we have multiple clients. Maybe you have a production and testing server, so you could enter a different URL if you needed to override it. Enter in your username and password, and then the script will create those 4 items inside Jamf. There was that momentary pause because it does have to check to make sure that the prerequisite steps earlier were inserted before it could even create the last one. So it has to do multiple calls to make sure those appear. Now, taking a look in Jamf, you'll notice we're sitting under the M's. All of our policies show up initially. All of our things show up initially as no category assigned, and you'll notice they're also showing up as unchecked, disabled, however you want to phrase that. And it's scoped to that temporary admin group that it created in an earlier step. And if you take a look through the policy itself, it's running our script that was created, But if you look at the details of this, you can see that it has already created those setups for you, that configuration, including the one right there, since it has to that. I keep calling it a hash, but it's not. But that base 64 encoded username and password for the account. All of that was set up. So by running that one script, you now have an entire workflow for giving somebody temporary admin access.
Wow, and that saves so much time, Chad.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, please. I mean, yeah. Because this came
this is
also
something
out
that
of,
we're,
eating your own dog food, as it were, of with the number of customers that we help, getting this set up time and time again, trying to save everybody, including ourselves, a little bit of time and a little bit of efficiency.
Yeah, and this is something that we're setting up for every one of those scripts within the Jamf toolbox. And some of them are much more complicated than this, and even have more policies that have to like work together and stuff like that. And it's real easy to just configure one little variable wrong or one little parameter wrong, and then the whole thing doesn't work. So this is a great way to get up and running right out of the box with a couple simple clicks.
And the other tool that we want to show off today is the updated version of our server map. If you've seen this tool in the past, it was a command line script that written in Python that would pull in all the information from your Jamf server, find out which pieces are currently in use and which ones are just sitting around as cruft. We wanted to, as part of our process that Chris will talk about, we wanted an easier way to help keep our systems clean. This is one that we're maintaining. So this version of this tool is a little application. It's a little GUI Python app. When you run this, it brings up the standard login screen. Enter in server, username, and paste in password. And it will pull in the information from Jamf and create all the linkages so that you know which pieces are connected to which pieces. And then, like I said, this is based on the original text version of this. So we wanted to make sure that if you wanted to be able to save a listing of the way everything is now, we wanted to be able to have that map for later. So you could either skip this, or you can click to save the server map, and just simply enter in the information. Let's go ahead and save this out. A little off to the side, and then it brings up a list of your categories. And I've got some intelligence in here to put anything that starts with the word deprecated at the top, or has the word deprecated, I should say, because from now on we're going to be getting ready to move our unused items to deprecated for follow-up. So it starts off by looking at policies, and it determines things as ready for deprecation based on the fact that it is not scoped, or it is unchecked, it is disabled, and it is not already in the deprecated category. Luckily, this being our test, we have a couple things we can get rid of, although this is just, like I said, marking these as deprecated. Same thing with configuration profiles. If it's unscoped, why is it still here? Take a look at it and potentially move it to deprecated. And then we move on to packages. And for packages, it's anything that is not current. It's not in the deprecated category currently, but it's also anything that is not being used by a policy. Adam, in this case, actually is literally deprecated, so we'll go ahead and move that one. And same thing with scripts. Anything that's not in the deprecated category, but is not being used actively by a policy right now. Luckily, we've got lots of these. So that moves those. Now at this point, please notice everything says delete in big letters everywhere to warn you. This is, and I had to insert a couple of bogus ones because I didn't want to delete something we needed. But these groups don't have the ability to simply move to deprecated. So we wanted to say this part we're cleaning up. These things will be deleted. So anything that is not being used if it's not part of scope to anything, it's in this list. Now at Rocket Man, we kind of have a practice of having a lot of our groups start with either an S or an M. S for scope and M for monitoring. So if a M item shows up, well, if an S item shows up in this list, then it's possibly something we created and we're no longer using anymore. If it shows up as M, this might be on somebody's dashboard. This might be a part of a saved report that's being, or not a saved report, but an automated email. So we want to keep these around, but we'll delete the test ones. And now it comes back and says, all right, anything that is in deprecated, either because we moved it to deprecated or because it was in deprecated. Anything you want, you can go ahead and select. And now when we hit delete, this is deleting those objects. And that is the end of that. So this is meant to be a much easier way of cleaning up a Jamf server. I'll hand it back to Chris because it ties a lot into our practices.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chad. So this is something Chad built specifically for us. If you know much about Rocket Man, we talk a lot about health checks and documentation best practices. And this tool just kind of helps us do a lot of that stuff. First of all, it gives you a really good bird's eye view of the server to kind of see like where different things are. But trying to find a policy or a configuration or package or script that's orphaned is really hard, because what you'll typically have to do is go into every individual policy within Jamf Pro and try to see, hey, is this one package in there? Is this one script in there? And if you have hundreds of scripts and hundreds of policies, that can be very cumbersome to go through. So this saves a ton of time as you're trying to go through that server. With that too, it helps guide you along with our documentation methodology a little bit. There's a lot that goes into documentation when it comes down to like making sure things are organized within Jamf Pro, but one of the biggest things is just making sure that you're moving things to a deprecated category when it's no longer being used. So we do this regularly when we're working with Jamf servers, but you need at the end of, every 3 months we go through this process where we kind of clean up a Jamf Pro server, and so we need a good way to like take all those items that are already deprecated and then delete them in mass. And that's another thing that this tool does really well. So
and along
for
those
us,
lines,
it's something, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add in there, the other thing that we find is a lot of the people we work with, because like I said, Chris and I have both done a number of jump starts where we're teaching people from day one. That are just getting started with a server. And yeah, it can take a few months before a cruft really builds up. But we've each done jump starts for companies where a new Jamf admin came in and they're having to pick up where somebody else left off. Or we're working with a customer signing up where we're handling things and we need to get our head around what was the previous person thinking. And this just kind of gives us a way to connect those dots faster.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to find more information about this tool, go to this webpage, rocketman.tech/Jamf-toolkit. This is going to be in the handouts that we distribute as well. And there's going to be a lot more information about what tools are there as well as pricing. We're releasing this today, so at JNUC. So you're going to be able to check it out today as you're hearing this presentation. Thank you so much for watching. We are so excited to have an on-site JNUC again this year. If you're at JNUC in San Diego, we're going to be there as well presenting. We presented earlier this morning, but please come around and find us. Talk to us about anything you like. We have a couple of brain dates throughout the week as well and different activities. Mostly we're just excited to see everyone else in this amazing community.
In 3D.
In 3D. IRL as the kids say these days. All right, with that, I will let you all go, but thank you again.
Thank you.